It is 10:15 and time to welcome back into the Morning Magazine for our weekly visit. His name is David Stokes. He is a policy analyst with the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm doing great, Manny. Great to be on with you, as always.
Well, it's always nice to get a chance to visit with you about really kind of anything and everything. And we're going to bounce around a little bit again here today, and that's okay. We like to do that here. Let's start first of all. We'll talk, and you and I, we've spent a lot of our time here on Show Me at the Lake visiting about planning and zoning issues of one type or another. And we've got another one here in the Lake of the Ozarks area, and it might be a surprise to some listeners, but to others, maybe not so much.
Well, right. There's a sort of a dock maker, an industrial concrete dock maker, that's seeking a planning and zoning change in Camdenton, in Camden County. And the part that jumps out at you is they're seeking a change from residential to industrial. And you don't see that very often. That doesn't mean at all that it's a bad thing or that the change shouldn't be approved. Just that it is the type of change that sort of grabs one's attention. Usually it's one level of residential to another level of residential or something like that. But rarely do you see residential to industrial zoning. Now, there's a good article in it on Lake News Online. And the more you read into it, it seems like it shouldn't really be that big of a deal because even though while this property is zoned residential, it's very, very close, as in across the street, from other industrial property. So it seems that this is probably a fair and reasonable change.
How often, is this one of these rare occurrences where you have this type of zoning request come in? Usually it's the other way around, isn't it?
It is. You don't see a lot of residential to industrial zoning changes anywhere, and I think that's probably because this particular section of that residentially zoned area was just sort of a strange place to have a residential zoning. It was probably just an off corner of a true residential area. But this one section, which is, from what I've read, largely surrounded and very close to other industrial and commercial uses, it seems a reasonable switch for this deck plant, which makes the concrete, and for the docks and decks that are so common around the Ozarks, a great business to have in the area, and I think Camden County certainly wants to keep them there. So while the change jumps out at you and probably jumps out to some of your listeners and readers, I think it's probably a perfectly reasonable change that won't have any large effect on anyone's lives in a negative way.
From a government perspective, is it easier or is it more difficult to look at a change like this that's maybe what you would call more non-traditional?
I do think it's probably harder. I had some experience when I worked for St. Louis County government. We did a lot of zoning changes there. I wasn't on the board myself, but attended a lot of the meetings and those things. So, yeah, these sort of big requests. It's one thing to go from R2 to R3 where you're only, allowing a multi-residential facility already in a residential area or something such as that. A big change like this is certainly trickier, and it certainly demands that everybody have their ducks in a row and that the people seeking the change make their case. But I think they've got some pretty good evidence when you point out that right around them are mostly other businesses. It's not like they're going to put a concrete plant right next to somebody's house. From what I've read and from what I understand, it seems a very reasonable change. And when everything gets put on the table and when everybody sees it and makes a judgment, I predict it'll probably go through, but who knows? Some of the residents who stood up to object to it, they may be making some excellent points to the members of the Planning and Zoning Board and the members of the County Commission.
Well, I do know, and every time you talk about planning and zoning, you just never know what, quite honestly, what is going to happen because, it's not a situation there where they are dropping a plant right in somebody's backyard. It's going to be across somebody's fence, but I'm sure residents here, just like really anywhere, when you have the addition of a facility, of a plant, whatever it might be, into what is a predominantly residential area, there are sure to be concerns.
There are concerns, and there are legitimate concerns. People buy property with an assumption that the zoning rules around them will remain consistent. Not everybody, but some people, research that when they buy a house. So you never want to just casually make these changes willy-nilly. I mean, spot zoning's a bad thing. You need to enforce your zoning while at the same time, make allowances for reasonable changes as time goes on. And your listeners know that I'm generally in support of making zoning changes when the case is made. And I think this company will make its case. I think it will be a good thing to have this business operating in Camden County. This is the type of business and jobs that the area needs. And I think in the end, a lot of times what happens, people object, and then the company comes back with a counter proposal to try and address those concerns, and that's excellent. That's how it should happen. So if there are objections to traffic or noise, hopefully the company can offer some mitigation to that and strike a reasonable compromise.
We're talking with David Stokes on this week's edition of Show Me at the Lake right here on News Talk 1150 and 97.5 KRMS. Another thing we did want to talk about here as we continue our time together is the healthcare mandate goes into effect next week and actually on Tuesday. And there is a story out today which is maybe a bit of a head-scratcher in the fact that it would appear Missouri's not going to have as many options, the residents of the state are not going to have as many options as other states when it comes to the marketplace. And what we mean by that is when you go online and you look at how many different choices you have. Looks like Missouri's going to have 17, but the statewide average around the country is about 54. David, is this something that was expected or maybe could have been predicted with the healthcare mandate?
I don't think so, Manny, and I think this is very strange that we have so many less options than the average state, while we are, unfortunately, still seeing the dramatic price increases from Obamacare that the other states are seeing. It's not like our reduced options are saving us much money. Patrick Ishmael with our office has done a lot of work on healthcare, and he's got a blog post up right now at showmedaily.org, which talks about some of these issues, and you can find a lot of good information on healthcare from Patrick's testimony and the like as to Medicaid expansion in our state and elsewhere. So I'm not our health expert, but the information that's coming out lately is just further information that Obamacare is going to be bad news for Missouri. The prices are going to be way higher than people are experiencing now. There was a very misleading report from the government that just came out a few days ago talking about how prices under Obamacare, these new premiums, are not going to be as much as expected, which was treated as good news by many in the media, which I think is why people don't trust the media, your show accepted, of course.
Thanks, David.
So they're comparing these prices. They're saying it's not going to be as high as expected, but they're just comparing this government report to a prior government report with predictions for several years down the line. They weren't making any comparison to what people are paying now. And the fact is that the average Missourian is still going to see a large average premium increase once Obamacare is in full effect. And for the average, I want to make sure I have my numbers here very carefully. For the average 27-year-old Missouri man, healthcare premiums in Missouri are going to increase 104% in the coming years. And for the average female, it's going to increase 29% for the average 27-year-old female. For 40-year-old people, it's going to increase as well, and it will increase for the elderly as well, but they didn't give all the data out for these details. You can find all this information on a very interesting Forbes report that our blog post links to, and it's really just not going to be good for this state or its people.
It's interesting because it seems like, and maybe this is how all of this is going to go as we get past October 1st and we see what's on the other side more or less, but it seems like for every report that comes out that touts how great the healthcare mandate is, there's another one that says, now hold on a minute, you've got to look at this, and then there'll be a counter one that goes to that. Is this something that very much like back in 2008, 2009 is going to be played out in the public arena known as the media?
Oh, absolutely, and it's going to take time if you're really interested in it. To your listeners, it's going to take time to really get in and try and see all sides. Nobody doubts that it's very complicated. Healthcare policy is very complex, and one change here can have enormous changes in other areas. Patrick Ishmael from our office at Show Me Institute does a nice job of covering it. I encourage you to check out his writings. But in the end, this Forbes report, which came out of the Manhattan Institute, which is a well-known New York think tank, I mean, they've compared what people are paying now. Not the government report was saying, "Oh, this is great. Prices aren't going to increase as much as we thought," compared to previous hypothetical government reports. The Manhattan Institute's work is comparing what people are paying now to what this latest report is saying they're going to pay in the future, and these price increases are substantial for the average American. For the average American person, male, it's going to be about 99% for men, 62% for women from their data here. And that's mostly for younger people there. It will be less for the elderly. But they're going to go up for everybody, and people, unfortunately, apparently have to get used to it.
It does appear that is where things are headed, and again, maybe we'll know more next week once everything kind of gets up and running. And for those again that maybe did not remember, Missouri is one of the states that basically said we don't want to run our own healthcare exchange. We're putting that in the hands of the federal government.
Right, and I think that was probably the good. That's a tough decision because, you know, most Missourians have shown in 2 votes that we don't want Obamacare. We've had 2 votes now, and both went heavily against state involvement in this. So our state legislature and leaders were doing what the voters wanted here. But now we're placing a lot of trust in the federal government to run our exchange, and I, for one, don't have any faith that they're going to operate it effectively. I mean, my family's we're in a health savings account, and Obamacare, while not eliminating them, is making it a little harder to operate health savings accounts. And that's the type of care that a lot of young people in this country need, these sort of high deductible, catastrophic type insurance rates. That's where we should be going, not for these mandated comprehensive policies that cover everything that in most cases a lot of young people don't need.
Well, we are just literally on the edge and the start of what is going to be a very lengthy, I'm sure, conversation for weeks and months to come as, again, healthcare just kind of gets up and rolling, or at least the mandate gets up and rolling next Tuesday. I did want to give you, as we're running out of time here, David, I did want to give you, though, a few minutes to talk about the CPAC event. Now, am I right? That gets started tomorrow, or is that Saturday in St. Charles?
Saturday in St. Charles.
Okay.
It's an all-day event. Conservative Political Action Committee, which has their well-known annual conference in D.C., but they have regional meetings a few times each year around the country. This fall, it's in St. Louis, and is this Saturday out in St. Charles. The Show Me Institute's excited to be a co-sponsor. We are sponsoring the educational components of the conference, not the well-known political component. So I want to make that clear. But we encourage everybody to get out there, whether you're interested in policy, politics, or whatever. You can still register. You can Google CPAC St. Louis, or it will come right up. There's time to register and go. It's going to be a great event Saturday, and some Show Me Institute people, including Patrick Ishmael, who is our healthcare analyst, are going to be talking there, and the rest of us are going to be manning a table there, passing out our economic literature and other studies for everybody to attend. So if you go to CPAC, be sure and come check out our table.
Well, we will encourage the audience to do just that. And again, David, if folks would like to find out more information about the Show Me Institute, where is the best place for them to do that online?
We have a lot of writings about healthcare and ways to improve healthcare in the United States and in Missouri from a more free market and an individualized manner. And you can find all that at showmeinstitute.org, and you can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes.
David Stokes with the Show Me Institute. As always, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for the visit. And we will again get together next Thursday morning here on News Talk KRMS.